All right, welcome to another episode of Capoeira in Canada. Tonight we have Professor Hélio of Semente de Angola, and he's currently living in Toronto. We believe, the only Angolero teaching here in Toronto. Welcome, Professor Hélio. I appreciate you
Thank you so
giving me
much.
your time. This is really cool. I know we've had some good conversations, both at your academy and at Rodas and stuff, and it's been wonderful. I'm really blessed to have you here, and I know with COVID and everything, it's been difficult for us to do many things. So let's talk about you for now. Let's why don't you tell us who Professor Hélio is and what brought you to Canada?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you for inviting me to be speaking on Capoeira, more specifically Capoeira Angola. So thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Really appreciate it. So my name is Hélio, and I am a student of Mestre Jogo de Dentro, who was a student of the late Mestre João Pequeno, from Mestre Pastinha, from Mestre Benedito. That goes all the way back, right? I've been in Canada since 2005. I moved to Montreal for a couple of years.
Okay.
And in 2007, I moved here with my ex-wife, Yasmin, who is also a Capoeira Angola teacher, a Calça Preta. And then we started a school called Center Ori, the Semente do Jogo de Angola, which is the school of Mestre Jogo de Dentro, was already in town. There was a guy called Boca Grande, Professor Boca Grande. Excuse me. Professor Boca Grande really. He didn't have he was a senior student of Lua, a lady called Lua, who was who was a student of Mestre Colette, and who was running the school here. Yeah. So the school in Toronto was, I believe, founded by Lua, who was a student of Mestre Colette, and then for whatever reason she had to stop, and Boca Grande took over. The idea was that he would be leading until someone would come from Brazil.
I wanna pause you there for a second, just so people understand the who Mestre Colette is. If I understand correctly, she's been teaching Angola in Montreal for probably 20 odd years, or even since the late 90s, if I recall.
Yep.
So just so people understand the connection, she's probably one of the oldest Canadian Angola messes, if not the only one.
That's correct.
So
yeah, it's incredible.
Cool. Yeah, it is really cool.
Yeah, you know, the idea is to get there, start talking about her eventually, because the importance of Mestre Colette in our group, Semente do Jogo de Angola, and in Canada is something that deserves quite a bit of time just to describe that point.
We'll come back to that. So, sorry, I just wanted to make sure people understood that for a second. That's all.
Yeah. So Mestre Colette, Lua was a student of Mestre Colette, and she was in Toronto. She started a group here. For whatever reason, she had to stop, and Boca Grande took over until someone arrived. Someone had come to Canada. I think they were hoping for someone with more ranking than myself, but I happened to move from Montreal, to Toronto. And the idea at the time was that what I suggested to him was because I was already teaching back home, back in Salvador, where I'm from, Salvador, Bahia, and so when I came to Toronto, the idea was I would be teaching, and that I spoke with him and let's start something, but whatever reason he had to stop. And then me and my ex, we started the Capoeira Angola Center Ori, which was in the west part of Toronto. Then I moved to Bavia, and now we are in this studio in the Oaken Chamber, which I am on my own now. Mm-hmm.
The Oaken Chamber. We can talk about that later too, because you're doing some really neat things with the leather work in Oaken, which is pretty cool.
That's right.
Neat. So, why don't you tell us about your history in Capoeira? When did you start, and what drew you to Capoeira Angola in particular? You know, let's hear about Hélio's history of Capoeira.
Mm-hmm. I started learning Capoeira Angola in late 1999. My father has always been into martial arts. I didn't grow up with my father, but he was someone very much into martial arts. I grew up watching samurai movies, as most of us. But the idea of martial arts always ran in our, at least as far as I can tell, in our bloodline. I always saw capoeira. The capoeira contemporary we had at the time was not very, at least the ones I had in my neighborhood, was what it was very helicopter like. That's how people refer to that kind of capoeira. Never really spoke to me. Don't know exactly why, but and then I used to work in a magazine store. In that magazine store, that's how I read like a crazy man. I was reading and reading. I worked there from 16 to 17, 18, and I read quite a bit. And at that time, I was the lead singer in a band, in a rap / rock band, and we had very political, very political lyrics. It's crazy because it emerged. Someone found it and put in the WhatsApp group that I have with childhood friends. It's really weird to hear myself singing or screaming.
Similar to Rage Against the Machine here in that era.
That's what we were into at the time.
All right. Yeah, I know that very well.
Yeah, man. So,
okay, 1 second. Hopefully he does unfreezes. Hélio, if you can hear me, you seem to have lost you.
The combination of being in a band.
Here we go. Okay.
And being in a magazine store, I was reading. I had to be reading, so I was reading quite a lot. So much so that in the neighborhood, whenever people would come to visit, like, yo, you know Hélio? Like, Hélio, yeah, the guy who reads. So that was my identifier. Like, the guy who reads a lot. Oh, he's over there. He lives there. So that was cool. And in that, I was reading to a lot of Jorge Amado. So Jorge Amado was the first time that I started seeing the conversation about capoeira being linked to politics. The idea of capoeira being linked to the African resistance in Brazil, right? That's when I started learning about Besouro, learning about Mestre Pastinha, learning about the like you having Lampião, Zumbi, and Besouro being all put in the same context as people's resistance against all the oppressions that we know so well that happens in Brazil up to this day, right?
Yes.
And then I was reading about that, and I was also reading about African spirituality. I was pretty young, and then there was an encounter through the band. There was an encounter that happened in Belém do Pará. This is the irony of this whole thing. I was born in Bahia. I grew up in Salvador, but I saw Capoeira Angola for the very first time in Belém do Pará, in an encounter that happened I believe it was November, December. It was an encounter organized by the Workers' Party and the Zapatista movement.
Okay.
And that was primeiro encontro pela humanidade contra o neoliberalismo. And that was the first time I saw Capoeira Angola. And now I'm seeing a kind of capoeira that really spoke to me because it was very much based on reasoning. It wasn't merely reflex. Reflex is part of the game, but it was first based on understanding. I need to read your position, read your body. Based on that non-verbal communication, I make decisions. And my best answer will be one that set me up for my next questions.
Right.
When I saw that very first time, I was like, there's a word for that I learned recently. Omnimous? Animus?
Anonymous?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Can you pronounce that again, please?
Anonymous. Or, oh, sorry, ominous. Sorry, ominous, I think is the word you're looking for.
Yeah?
Ominous, yeah.
Because I looked at it and it spoke to me. I had no way of describing, I had no way of articulating what I was seeing, but it's like all of a sudden, all those samurai movies I grew up watching, the idea of African spirituality, which is very similar, which is quite similar to Shintoism, all hit me at once. And like when I saw that, I was like, okay, I know that's capoeira because I see berimbau, I see the singing, but what is that? And someone was like, no, that's Capoeira Angola. That's the original form of capoeira. That's the capoeira that was brought from Africa, that was developed by the enslaved people. And that's the form that is not mass produced. Like, okay, that's very interesting. Then I moved back to, when I go to Salvador, like I go straight to a place called Quilombo. It was a Quilombo Cecilia at the time. And that's where some old students, senior students of Mestre Jogo de Dentro were leading classes. And then I joined. And it then never left. I was start training Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. And again, it was already in a context of already historical, already philosophical, already spiritual. All of the things has always appealed to me. But it's always very interesting to me to be someone who grew up in the outskirts of Salvador. I grew up in Cajazeiras, and I go see capoeira all the way by the Amazon. It's kind of ironic, but that's how it went.
That's cool. Right on. So yeah, I guess we already talked about why you started teaching here. Let's just quickly. Well, we can dig into challenges of running or starting running and maintaining an academy pre-COVID, because we know COVID is is pretty much shut all of us down in many ways. But when you came here to Toronto and started running an academy, let's talk about your experiences with that. Like, what have been some of your greatest challenges and in getting there, and getting to where you are today?
Yes. So I moved to then when I was in 2004, 2003, 2004, there was an encounter organized by my master. Now we have at the time it wasn't called Semeando yet. Now we have an event that happens every other year, and that's called Semeando. So in that event, I met my ex-wife, Yasmin, and she said, so I was in that place in my life when either you learn capoeira, you get a job, or you continue your studies. And she said, well, this encounter that is happening in Salvador, in Campinas and Salvador, will be happening in Montreal 6 months from now. Do you want to come? I'm like, well, yeah. So all of a sudden, I found myself in Montreal. There's way more to it, but no need to be mentioned yet. At that point, like, okay, I'm in a place where I can train, I can work, and I can study. I can at least learn a new language. So, she said, if do you want to stay? I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. Like, okay, so we get married. So we got married, and we stayed in Montreal for 2 years there. And so there I was training with Mestre Colette, which was a good amount of time, and life life happens. Started work there, and having, and someone was like, okay, Toronto is a bit, it's different. It's not two languages, and there is less resistance. There is less friction. And I came to visit, and I'm like, okay, I like Toronto. So, and it's funny because like back home, when I thought of Canada, I always thought of a place that looked like the U.S. That's where we grew up, right? So when I
Yes,
go
yes.
to Montreal, this looks different from what I was expecting. Don't get me wrong, I love Montreal; it's a beautiful city.
Yeah.
But when I came into Toronto, like, oh, this is what I thought it was gonna be. Like, do you wanna move to Toronto? She's like, yeah, let's move to Toronto. Then I moved here, and now I get to your question, right? I think I remember once when our good friend Tahasha was about to leave. We went for food, and I remember
Ah, yes.
speaking
Yeah, yeah.
Mexico. Oh, yeah, and he
Yeah.
was mentioning mentioned some parts of the history of Mestre Lua, and a similar thing. Like coming from Brazil, you want to teach a capoeira that will work in Toronto, that will work in in Europe, in North America, anywhere in the world. Um, so when you ask in terms of difficulties um, and the challenges and the good part of things, that was it. Because Capoeira Angola is so it's so traditional,
Mm.
and you move into a modern and secular society. So if Mestre Lua, who teaches Capoeira Contemporânea,
Mm.
who is slightly closer to an ideal of sport, it was already a kind of a it was difficult adapting. Imagine a Capoeira Angola that's so traditional and the ideal of ancestry is so present and the fundamental is so present. So I would say that is something that is very difficult to to operate in a city in a place to be in North America, right? Because Brazil is old world and new world at the same time. So
Yes.
in that crossroad of the Americas, excuse me, in that crossroad of the Americas, you find a place that you can find pockets that are very traditional. You can find pockets that are very modern.
Mm.
You can find places that there is this incredible
Like an
mix.
intersection of the two.
Exactly, and they come in here. I really, in my young mind, like no, if I teach exactly how it is in Salvador, people will understand. And it's still not something that is solved in my mind because the way I perceive the way I perceive Capoeira Angola, I see as a ancestral technology, a culture that it transcends nation, right? But people's culture will determine how they will receive the information
Mm.
and how what they will accept or not accept in their own lives, right? So this 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 idea of trying to be quote unquote, I put quotation marks because those are loaded words, but quote unquote authentic and original, and at the same time adapting and be a translator so that people can understand, right? There's this. So, for example, what I'm trying to say here, I don't know if I'm being clear, is if when someone asks me what capoeira is, not that I'm capable of describing what capoeira is in the first place, but immediately where their mind goes is to sport.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember having a student who used to call me coach. Like, I'm not your coach. He used to call me coach. What's show me that movement again, coach. I'm like, yo, I'm not a coach, you know. Like, because if you perceive reality based on your frames. So okay, it's movement, looks like martial arts. It is martial arts. We sweat. It's a sport. How do we keep points? Like, we don't really keep points like that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
So
remember
the receiver, please.
I remember when I first started, and then I had one of my parents who used to watch me, when I was training as a teenager in martial arts, and growing up, like when I was young, I started with karate, and again, it was put on the pads, and you're playing for points, right? And then and then in kung fu we had there were like stops between the sparring and stuff. We didn't really we didn't really spar for points or whatever, or play for points, but then when they were witnessing how we played capoeira in the holiday, they were like, it was my dad, and he was like, it's chaos, there's no order. And I said, but when you understand, there is order, right? It looks like chaos from the outside because like it never stops. People just keep jumping in, buying the game, and it's go, 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 go. And it's like, and there's no like hajime, go, and then stop and start again, right? And it was a funny conversation, and it's, that's, yeah. So it's like trying to explain that to someone who's new or not having an understanding, or not having been around it enough to kind of get it. It's a challenge for sure in its own right.
A challenge. It is a challenge, but it's also fascinating in a sense because, for example, being an African-derived art, beauty is very, very important, right? So it's like you're gonna get to jiu-jitsu match. The goal is submission.
Yes.
I wanna make you tap. I wanna choke you and make you tap, or put you to sleep, or gonna harm one of your limbs.
Right.
In capoeira, you have that. I mean, we don't choke, we don't grab, but it's like there is a martial aspect to it. But it gotta be beautiful. Right? It's like add the extra thing, It's like you have the understanding that it's like, okay, I want to give you a rasteira, but if I break the tempo of the movement so that I give you a rasteira, the rasteira doesn't really count. It's like, it does count.
It's like a movimento, movimento limpo, movimento suja. It's like, right? Pick cleaner or dirty move, right? So the thing is, that is one thing. You're doing one. You are participating in a small world that represents the bigger world, or within that you have many layers of existence in the same practice. It's like the way your master looks at you means something. The music someone is singing also is telling you something. The way the berimbau is being played is telling you something. So did someone arrive? So teaching something like that and please don't think I'm criticizing this society, but a society that is highly verbal, highly, it's like so much we learn in back home is through what is called osmosis here. Yes.
What if you translate is what people say convivência, right? You learn through convivência. And here, like there you see it and you see it and you see it. When it happens, you already know what's up.
Yeah, it's
yeah, the first time someone sees it, they're like, what is that? It's like, man, you're not ready to know what that is yet, kind of thing, And like from a traditional perspective, a lot of things you do in Afrocentric philosophies, you do first, you understand later. You gotta do a couple of times, and then eventually you understand. And then you come to a place where it's like, I would like to join your class. Should I wear shoes yet? And then 2 hours later, okay, do I have to wear white? And 2 hours later, it's like which is great. It's a literate society where people will ask you 300 questions before they make a move.
Right.
Which is great, but then you get to capoeira, which is an oral tradition.
Yes.
That's where you're gonna have, and both are correct.
There's
no. They're both good depending on the context, kind of thing, right?
Like we talk about learning capoeira pre Mestre Bimba days, or the era of Mestre Bimba and the establishment of the academy. It was you would go and you just watch and you observe and absorb. Go on your own, practice and learn, try to figure it out, come back, observe some more, go practice on your own. If you're lucky, someone will realize and see you, and they would take you under their wing, someone who's been doing it longer, and then kind of help lift you up and guide you more, right? But it's that whole process of taking time and just observing on your own, right? And trying to figure out on your own, and that self exploration is probably
we can speculate on that. Rather, we can elaborate on that. I've come across some documents that basically speaks of one-on-one teaching, right? I've come across documentations of like, oh, this African takes this person to the backyard and teach sequences.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I was speaking with one of my students yesterday was that some people within the Capoeira Angola world, they look at Capoeira from a popular culture. Like if let's get you a bit of translation.
Sure.
So in North America, when we say popular culture, you're speaking of music and stuff. In Portuguese, in Brazil, popular culture means that is like, so what people in English call pop culture would be what we call mass culture. And what we call, okay, I guess the best word is folklore, folk culture. That's it. So there's this separation that at least I perceive it that way. That is like some people believe it's folk culture. It's from the farmers market. It's from the proletarian. It's from the poor people who all got together and capoeira was practiced. And that is true. From my camp, I look at an ancestral culture that manifests itself through folk culture as well, right? So for me, it's not far-fetched to think in terms of there's a book called Fighting for Honor, which there's a lot that one can question, but it's like a pioneer in a sense. It's basically a book about the history of African martial arts.
Okay.
And there's a suggestion. He claims that a lot of the movements we do in capoeira, they were actually practiced in the armies back in the continent.
Mm.
So you have description about Queen Nzinga performing incredible dodging and exiting attacks from certain situations using sangramento, which is now, if you look at capoeira and we look at that description, it fits. If we think of capoeira as something that is an amalgam of different martial arts from people in the diaspora, but also coming from a particular roots, you can see that the roots go very deep. So, for example, this is a good thing, I believe, because when we think in terms of oral tradition, we think in terms of something being non-written, right? Now, a lot of those things, they are, in fact, there's a lot of non-verbal communication where would that be categorized? As oral tradition or as being taught? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
A lot of the things that we do in capoeira, we have been doing for hundreds of years.
Right, but we don't,
now,
it's not orally talked about. It's through that observation, right?
Observation.
Yeah.
So like when you say like people will seeing and observing and doing those things, is like very true. But a lot of, for example, in karate, you're gonna have something called kata,
mm-hmm.
right? And you translate the kata. You did kung fu. You grew up in martial arts. So the kata, the translation is form. There are movements in the capoeira world that no matter what kind of capoeira you're doing, they will be there, and that can be seen as kata. And when you read Desch-Obi, he says that those are worldview manifestations that was kept in the continent and sent to the diaspora in our bodies, which doesn't demand us to be articulating and writing it down, because we know in our bodies ancestral.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
Now, if you believe in all that and you want to teach and practice all that, and the person can only understand that as a sport, of course there will be clash, right? Like I'm not here to really have all those conversations. I want to sweat. I had
Mm.
a really hard day at work, and I was just thinking the whole day. Now I'm doing my physical thing. I don't want to be thinking and understanding what Master Pastinha meant with that. And they are correct. Like you're here for your downtime, and here I am like, no, no, no. You need to learn how to sing a ladainha.
I'm actually glad you touched on this because it's something that's kind of been on my mind. When you talk about that whole, um, the whole concept of, yeah, people just want to come to class, they want to kind of shut their mind off and basically, you know, just train and sweat and work out their whatever frustrations they may have through the movement and through physical labor, right, and training. Um, but I think, drawing on like my own experience a number of years ago, like I was telling you before the meeting, I've worked in the IT industry, and there were a couple of companies. There was one in particular where I was working like 80-hour weeks for 9 months straight, and it was I ended up in like a burnout state basically, in a very unhealthy burnout state. At that point, it was like I left the company, moved on to another one, and I was kind of just recuperating from that, and eventually came back to Capoeira. Um, and it was that time when I came back. And I started looking at my experiences with hitting that burnout state through my work, and then looking at um, the experience of the African in Brazil as a slave, and how they probably didn't have, maybe they talked about it, maybe they didn't, because again, it wasn't really documented, but they they were experiencing the same thing essentially, being out, whether it was the cane fields or coffee or whatever it was they were harvesting for the slave masters, but then coming back to the senzalas and forming a roda and just come together as a community, and let's just work off all of our stress from the day. And um, maybe whether they knew it or not, whether they really understood the connection between mental and emotional health and physical health. Like they didn't have the science, but I suspect, and they're probably not the only culture, but I think, again, it's just an opinion in my mind, I think they figured it out, right? It was the coming to the Roda was their way to maintain their physical health as best they could in order to keep their mental and emotional health in check. And
Right.
it's a odd thought that's been kind of lingering in the back of my head for
No, it's absolutely.
a couple of
Yeah.
years now.
Uh-huh. Because there's we have documentation of slave lords keeping the weekend free, because if if you let the people under bondage have that particular day to celebrate, to have that fun, to dance and to sing, that would prevent rebellion. So, right?
Mm.
So definitely you have that. But for me, one thing that for me is important to highlight is, um, again, if we understand that a cosmology, people's cosmology is mapped in their body when they are doing their martial arts. So, for example, there's some scholars who says you can understand a lot about a people by the way they fight, right? So if you look at um, let's look at karate and capoeira, you can understand a lot about Okinawa and how they perceive fighting, and capoeira, and you can see how southern Angola person deals with the same thing,
Mm.
right? The drumming that is involved in the rhythm, right? or even Muay Thai, how the drumming is involved and how the grabbing or not grabbing, how the kicking not kicking.
Right.
Well, so I find that is unless we remove a particular frame, like we looking at that time from our perspective of being a modern man, a modern person. So when you think in terms of you have the favela, sorry, you have the senzala as a place where mythically capoeira emerged from.
Right.
I've heard numerous people say like no capoeira was born in the senzalas, which is like it makes sense in a simplistic narrative, but it also implies that people had no memory when they arrived in Brazil. When they come as slaves, one day they're so tired and they just hit the drums and they start kicking one another.
Yeah, right. It didn't just come from out of the air.
Right.
There were bits and pieces that came from
that comes
from Africa, right?
Right.
From where they came from.
And then what happens? So when you come out of the field, when you're doing hard labor and you can being in a circle and be doing what your ancestors were doing, that is not only physical, that is not only intellectual, but it's a perfect mix of both, which will be, some might say, spiritual. It's a spiritual endeavor. It's a prayer you're doing with your body. So that really renews your strength for the next day.
Yeah.
Now, when you speak in terms of burnout, for example, which is like, I'm sorry to hear something like that. It's really to be worked as a battery kind of thing, like you go all the way and then you have to stop to recharge because someone will consume your energy and for money. It's a tragic thing. Now, what do I mean by bringing that up? Because in my young man's mind, I don't care that you burned out if you don't understand the historical importance of what you're doing. You're nothing but an appropriator. If you don't understand the history of my people in the diaspora,
yep,
and you just want to be here jumping and sweating and going home, you're here for a product, and I'm not selling no product. I'm teaching. And that was like what the conflict was. Like, no, hold on. First off, I'm not your coach because this is not a sport.
Right.
Second off, if you come in here just to sweat in the wrong place, man.
Go to the gym.
That's what my mind was. It's like, if you come in here just to sweat in the wrong place. Today, I understand what it is to be burned out. Today, I understand what it is to have an extremely stressful day.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to be hearing about the importance of why you do Volta ao Mundo to the left. I just want to train. Today, I understand that. At the time, I was like, no. You're not going to be here and don't know what yeah means. You're not going to be here and not understanding that when you're doing capoeira, you're not just an individual no more. You're an individual who is embodying a collective practice, and it's your job to maintain that, document, and pass to the next generation. Right? As a young man, I somewhat radical in my way of teaching. But again, it's like the context is important, right? Mm-hmm. The context. If I am in a resistance mode, same way when I'm coming from the cane field, and I'm in a resistance mode, my morality doesn't have to be as strict as if I was someone. When I say morality, I mean the largest sense. But there is a difference between if I'm a construction worker who comes home very tired and want to have a beer, mm-hmm. is one thing. If I'm someone who is doing intellectual work, who can have breaks whenever I want to go drink my coffee and come home, it's like, should I really be having this beer every single day? It's context, right?
Yes. Yeah.
If I'm doing a physical labor and I want to cultivate, and the question is, had them not being under bondage, would that just be ludic? Would just that only be a fun moment, or there would be more ceremonial aspect to it, or there would be more a mentorship between the seniors, would it be closer to what it was once upon a time? Now, of course, I'm fully aware of the fact that plenty that I'm saying is also romanticism of history.
Mm.
I'm aware of that. I'm aware of the fact that a lot of that, a lot of our understanding of martial arts, regardless of which one, will have a level of romanticism because that's how our myth, that's how mythologies are made. It's a bit of, okay, Mestre Pachinha was a great man, but he wasn't really the one who saved Capoeira. He's the one who represents a whole bunch of other people.
Yeah.
Mestre Bimba was a great man, but he's not the one who created the Capoeira Regional. He's the one representing a whole bunch of people. But our brains just collapse things in a mouth because we're going to put it in our pocket and move on.
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about this one. Now that you've been in Canada for some time now and you've been teaching here in Toronto, based on your observation and what you've seen, do you see that there's been any influence on capoeira from the Canadian culture?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you see an impact of Canadian culture on how capoeira is taught here, and how and has it affected you in any way, or help maybe steer or guide you or direct you in and how you teach capoeira and how you explain capoeira to be played? Has there been an so
mm-hmm.
tell us how.
100%. The personally speaking, right? The idea of how, because, excuse me, I just going back to what you said about your father looking at capoeira.
Yeah.
He's like, this chaos. I remember when I came to Canada for immigration process, I couldn't move back. I couldn't go back home. So it took me 5 years before I went back for the first time.
Okay.
Living in a city that is all in the grid and everything is on time, and you show up and it says the subway is coming in 3 minutes, and in 3 minutes the subway is there. Then I go back to my hometown for the first time and I look around like, this is chaos.
Because things just happen when it kind of wants to happen, right?
I just looked at it, it's like, wow, this is very interesting. And the guy, my house, where we're building a capoeira space, we face the street, right, the main street. And the guys are coming the motorcycle, and you have the road bump, is that how you call it? And they would go like, there's a tiny space in between the.
I think you froze again on me.
I guess I will keep talking.
Yeah, there you go. You're back.
Right.
So let's go back to talking about the motorcycle. I lost you at the motorcycle, the beginning of the motorcycle description.
Right. So I remember looking from upstairs and just watching the guys coming in the motorcycle. Wait, young guys, of course, coming in the motorcycle. They are topless, and there's the bump.
The speed bump.
Like,
the speed bumps. Yes.
The speed bump.
Yeah.
Yes. And the sidewalk, and they would come and like, whoom, and they keep going. And everything is, again, the idea of beauty, right? Everything needs to look cool as you do.
Of course.
Boom, boom.
Você precisa
Like,
você precisa ter um pouco molejo, um pouco elegância.
And I remember looking like, man, this in Canada, this in Toronto, this would never fly. This is just like, someone would be like, why are you putting your life in danger? Why are you putting everybody's life in danger like that? It looks like you're froze again.
Yeah, we're good.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So now, every time I go home, it takes me a good week before I kind of adapt back to my city. Now much less because I've been back and forth so many times. But a perfect world would be like Salvador and Toronto, the same place, because the level of organization, the level of safety, the planning, the like you doing construction in Salvador in my neighborhood, you need to get something done. Perhaps not so anymore. Hopefully not. But you need to get something done. The material is not there yet. The construction worker might not show up today because it's already in another house. So all of those things reflect quite highly in how you look at capoeira, how you teach capoeira, how you plan capoeira will start on time, and not when people show up. You gotta. So all those things has helped me quite a lot. Speaking English, for example, the access to certain information that is only in English at this point in time, and to be honest, it's like uh, uh, um, how I teach, how I perceive capoeira, how I can understand certain trends. There was a so-called mestre recently who posted a very complicated video talking about capoeira tradicional is dead. That's how he started his video. Capoeira traditional is dead, died of corona, he said. Now, I knew exactly why he was saying capoeira traditional is dead. That's Nietzsche. God is dead. If I start any sentence with God is dead, I would start controversy.
Oh, for
If I
sure.
say capoeira tradicional morreu de corona, I will get 100 views because I'm starting with controversy.
Yep.
But I knew where he was coming from. I knew where the dead part was coming from. You know what I'm saying? So to be living in a era that we're living in terms of information, social media, and the capacity to perceive reality using multiple frames and look at different layers, like all that I owe for the fact that I live here, and that will always reflect in my teaching, in my game, in how I can be of service to my people, to my masters, and you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
So in so many, and another thing that is very interesting about a place like Toronto is our relationship with with vanity and ego and competition is very different. Like the hurdles that I've been part of in Spadina and Bloor, for example, those hurdles are so beautiful and so powerful, and you can have a very scrappy game that will end pretty good. Nobody's gonna go somewhere and come back, and it's like to see the relationship with vanity and ego in a place like Toronto in comparison to old world. It's very. I remember playing on the street here and doing something really cool and looking around like, if you behave very humbly, people appreciate. If you do something really cool, like, yo, look at me, look what I just did, everybody's like, why is this guy showing off? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's very interesting. And like I was mentioning, I was talking to someone, he's like, oh no, this is Toronto the good. People don't like people showing off here. It's like, oh, I like that.
But
So every time I go home, that's my mind. It's like, be humble. You gotta be humble.
you
No
can
matter what you
you
do, no
can
matter how good you are.
you can do
Go
your
ahead.
thing here, and you can demonstrate, um, for the most part, like, play your game. If you're amazing at floreros, I mean, do it. But like you said, it's the perception of how you behave afterwards, right?
Right,
Do you stop and look,
right.
oh, did you see me? Look what I did, right?
Exactly.
Go away. We saw you. Great. Okay,
Right,
just keep going. Like,
right.
right? Just keep
Now
going.
imagine coming here at 22, you know?
Mm.
Like at 22, 23, I was training like a madman. I was drinking. We didn't have much money, so it was like coffee, bread, and training.
Yep.
Like 3 a.m. I'm in the roof training capoeira. So when I got here, I was sharp, sharp. And it's like you do something really, really cool. Like anybody saw that?
Yeah.
Like yeah, we did see it, but we don't like it here. Don't move like that. You know?
Ah.
And it's so good to put you back in your truth. You know?
Yeah.
That those things are like those are lessons that that's being in a highly educated society, you know, where people are passionate but within measure, different from the level of passion you have back home, you know.
That's a good
And
way of
those
putting it.
things
I like how you say that.
are very, yeah, they're very, very like how it influences you and how you navigate life and relationships is priceless, you know. Hmm.
Cool, cool. All right, I got one more thing. Actually, I've got two more things I wanted to talk about. If you were to give someone some advice about teaching capoeira here in Canada, what would be like your one grain of rice that would be the golden piece of advice that you would give?
I thought about this today. I had a feeling that question was coming, and I thought quite a lot about it. My immediate answer is I don't know. I don't know. Like I
That's okay.
operate from a place of, yeah,
It's okay not to
I
know.
like operating, right. I like operating from a place of authority. Before I give an advice, I would prefer to be an authority on something and having success as a school, for example, which is relative, and we can talk about that. But if I was so, what I did in my mind was like, let me reframe the question. What I would have told my younger self, and um, and what I would advise my younger self today would be something in the lines of things things takes time. If people are coming to sweat, let them come to sweat and slowly introduce the other parts. You know, um, you don't have the idea of adapting without compromising, without negotiating with the unnegotiable, right? There are tenets in capoeira, there's fundamentals in capoeira that we don't negotiate. There are things that we do negotiate. What are those things that can be negotiated, and how do you do so in a way that you can have a excuse me, that you can have a easier time, like things can flow relatively more harmonious without so much friction. Um, no,
For the student, or for the teacher, you think?
for the students, the
Yeah.
teacher in relation to the students,
Yeah. Okay.
because that's something that I struggled with. That that's what I would tell my younger self. Now, at the same time, I go back and forth. At the same time, what I was up against when I just arrived, because just look at, let me see if I can demonstrate it from my perspective. I am carrying something of so much value and so powerful and beautiful that so many people died to preserve.
Mm.
And I am the representative of my master, who is the representative of his master. I'm gonna do my very best. So, and you, for example, the common narrative that you had in early 2000s was capoeira was born in the senzalas. Like, if that's what you want to believe, fine. But as my student, it's my obligation to tell you that that's not the case.
Mm.
You know, if you want to think, I remember having students who came to me and like, oh, it's okay that I'm late, and it's okay that I'm having fun during the class because capoeira is malandragem. And I'm saying, sir, do you even know what malandragem is?
Yeah.
Because the relationship that the way you commodify certain cultures, especially black culture, is the oversimplification of it. So you're gonna imagine a man, usually a man, who will be a malandro, who lies and have fun everywhere and is always drinking, and who is practicing this thing that came from the senzala.
Mm.
And here comes Hélio, like, excuse me, no, 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 I don't drink. I'm not womanizing. I'm a very serious guy, and I try not to lie. And this capoeira you practice in there that you think comes from the senzala actually comes from way far. The history of my people doesn't start in the boat.
Oh,
Of
for
course,
sure.
there will be no easy way to represent capoeira in that way.
Yeah.
No, so like I'm just being my own advocate and being my own lawyer now. It's like in one hand, in one hand you wanna be an easygoing guy. In the other hand, you can't compromise certain things. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
that's I guess I haven't articulated that well enough the
No,
way
I
they
think
like to
I
say.
think I think you touched on it, and I'll rephrase it in a way that I think when my understanding is there's a difference between a new student, like you used a good word of commoditizing certain terminology, and because they believe they understand what it really means. For instance, you talk about malandrage and the malandro, um, and they're using that as an excuse to show you, and it's my opinion, because I have a thing about um, being on time and showing up early. Always show
Mm,
up 5-10 minutes early. Be on.
right.
It's better to be early than and then be late all the time, right? So if
Sorry
I
to interrupt you.
yeah
Sorry to interrupt. What someone just taught me. If you're on time, you're late. In relation to your question that you asked about how
yes yeah
being in Canada influences me as a
when
teacher, as a
you're on time
capoeirista,
you're
like
late, but
if you're
when
on
you're
time, you're
early you're
late,
on time.
right?
Yeah,
It's like those things are. Anyway, that's
but
what I wanted
but
to comment.
yeah, no, and that's a very good point. But then to have a new student, or well, maybe not even new, but to have a student to then commoditize a term and a term that they, when they use it in that context, they clearly don't understand um, its true meaning and where it comes from. Only to excuse their behavior, basically, right?
Mm,
And by doing something as simple as continuously, or having a history of showing up late on a regular basis, they're missing the martial aspect of showing the teacher the respect that I will be here for you when you know I'll be here on time so that class can start, and I'm not disrupting class after it's already started in that particular context. And now you've got two things going on here. You've got a disrespect to a teacher of martial arts, and those things that, as you said earlier, there are things that you cannot negotiate, right? And those are one of those things in my mind. And now,
mm,
and then on the same token, you've got somebody now commoditizing and a misunderstanding of a way of being that comes from Brazilian culture,
right.
right? So,
Right.
and it's those. I like how you put it. And later on, like you said, there are other negotiable things, um, and that would probably be a whole another hour of conversation. I suspect. I suspect.
Right.
But I'm gonna make a note of that, because I think we'll this first series is just about the introductions of all the teachers that are here in Canada, and then we'll come back, and maybe that'll be a good topic for another series for the podcast. One more thing. So this is just kind of a fun one. The last thing I wanted to ask you about is, tell us about one of your most memorable, or most memorable moments in your academy, or during your time teaching, or perhaps one of your most proudest moments, or moments that gave you the most pride of accomplishment, or whatever it may be. Tell us about one of those.
Hmm. Uh, um, I don't know if you can tell, I'm someone who don't. I don't. The victories I kind of like don't pay much attention. I look for what, like, okay, what can I improve here? So that's one question that is hard to remember certain things. In 2010, we brought our mesh to me and my ex-wife. We brought our mesh to Toronto under our leadership for the first time. Boca Grande had brought him already. Lua had brought Professor Lua from Semente had brought him
Right.
as well. But it was the first time that me and her and I brought him, and that was very very powerful moment. We had the event was called a Go. Ago is a Yoruba word. It's a, in African Brazilian tradition, whatever you stand on any in someone else's land, you say you ask permission to be stepping in there. So it's like something that we learned quite early on in within the worldview of West African tradition. So that event was called Ago, and we had the leader of the First Nations, Don, Mr. Don came in and he had an opening ceremony in which we were saying Ago to the First Nations of this land, and that was a very powerful moment when we like I here I am asking permission from indigenous to the indigenous people of this land
Mm-hmm.
so that I can practice my ancestral technology in here. And that was a really beautiful moment, and we learned a lot. It was powerful. I remember that he introduced himself and they started singing and people started crying. It was a beautiful, beautiful moment. And then we had the Roda, and it was like just very powerful. That's one of the proudest moments that I had as a leader to be remembering the pillars of my culture that before anything recognizes whatever culture you step, whatever lands, whoever people's culture you are dealing with whenever you visit somewhere. And that was a powerful moment. That event was really good.
That's cool. That's cool. It's like walking into someone else's home and taking a moment to, it's like ask the permission to enter and showing that respect of, stepping through their doorway basically, but on a bigger scale. On a bigger scale and on a, oh, I think we lost your sound.
No.
Oh, there you go. There you're back. It's all right. Technology is great, but it's not perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Humility, right? Humbling yourself before you come in.
Absolutely.
Before so you're mentioning the people misusing certain terms like malandragem and etc. And I remember that was a conversation I had with one of them because of the power of narrative, right?
Yeah.
You said the martial aspect of it. If in your narrative of capoeira it comes from the senzala, there is no martial in there because your culture is coming from enslaved people.
Yes. Okay.
If you understand that that culture is coming from people that existed before being enslaved and being taken to Brazil, then there will be martial. Then there's an understanding of being linked to the battlefield, and that will frame how you perceive it, what you're practicing. You know, just a quick comment on that because I know that he didn't want that because it's very powerful.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Cool. Um, Professor, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome.
Thank
You know, I know I got to be honest. It's been because in my world, I don't really need to leave my apartment in these days. I get up and I walk. I make coffee and then I walk another 10 feet and I'm at my desk and it's work all day, right? So, and so it's good to see and just have conversations with people that are in the community in the GTA here, which we don't get to do too often. So thank you again so much for your time and some great insight. Oh,
Absolutely.
there it is. There it is.
Very much.
The mic keeps cutting out on your end. It's okay.
No.
Oh.
Yeah. Thank you so very much for having me. I really appreciate the invitation. I want to thank you. I want to thank the whole community, Mestre Lua, Contramestre, Camarão, and other Contramestres, other mestres in town. Thank you very much for doing this. We are in, as you said, waking up, walking 10 steps, making coffee, coming back. So like this moment of isolation, as I said before we started, it's difficult. However, it gives us the opportunity to articulate and understand. And if the technology and this conversation is what we have, let's use it. So the initiative of having a podcast and being interviewing the larger community in the city, so that people know who we are and what we're doing and where they can find us. This is a noble a mission, and I want to thank you for that. And I'm very honored to be part of the project in any way. So thank you very much.
I appreciate it. No problem. All right. We're going to call it a night because I think it's getting late, and we all have to get up early one way or another. So,
Yes, sir.
all right, just hang on.